Let's talk about knots, Dyneema slings, and minimum breaking strength when we are constructing climbing anchors. Hi there, I'm Jason. Recently, when I posted some videos where we had been using a quad anchor, which you can learn how to make by following the link in the description, I got several questions about the wisdom of tying knots in slings, and even a few "don't ever do that" warnings, especially when using Dyneema slings. There are some real downsides to tying those knots, but some upsides as well, and guides and other serious climbers do it all the time. Why? Well, because there are no perfect solutions, so there are situations or circumstances that may tilt a climber to use one solution over another. So, I thought we'd talk about three different anchor configurations that are very simple. Not because I am suggesting you use these anchor configurations, but rather because they make for a very good lens through which we can discuss some of the trade offs that come from when configurations and material types
Nice.
come together. We're going to talk about the Magic X with load limiting knots, and the Ponytail Master Point anchors, all coming from two anchor points. And right there is one reason why I'm limiting this discussion's scope. Using two anchor points is very good for illustrating some topics because it is both clean to look at and it makes the math I'm about to share very simple. And sometimes with bomber gear, it's enough. But there are many times out in the real world when two anchor points aren't enough. There is a lot more to building good anchors than just knots and material. But anyway, the Magic X is constructed very easily. You clip one end of the sling to one anchor point and the other end to the other point. You then take one of the two sagging bites of sling and put one half twist in it before clipping a locking carabiner through. Its main purpose is to allow your direction of pull to change while keeping somewhat equal tension on the two anchor points, which can be helpful for wandering routes like you might get in some alpine environments. But what this doesn't do is, first, offer redundancy if the sling were to get cut. Here I'm using webbing that isn't pre-sewn just so you can see what happens if the material breaks. And second, it can't stop a shock load on one anchor point if the other anchor point should fail. The master point carabiner will slide all the way down until the loop catches it, suddenly potentially putting greater forces on the remaining anchor point. That could matter if we have bad rock or any other reason to doubt the remaining anchor point. Oh, by the way, then we probably should have put in more anchor points than two to begin with. The Magic X, however, is exceptionally easy to tie as there are no knots, and it is very, very strong. Dyneema slings are rated to a minimum breaking strength of 22 kilonewtons or nearly 5,000 pounds of force when they are new. And this anchor configuration is doubled over. That means you can get double the strength. 44 kilonewtons is a lot, approaching 4 times what your climbing rope must be rated to support. Keeping all that in mind, let's talk about tying in load limiting knots and examine some of the trade-offs. The first downside of a Magic X with load limiting knots, at least compared to the Magic X, is obvious. You have to tie two knots. That could be difficult and time consuming on a snowy winter ridge with gloves on. And loaded knots can be difficult to untie. So why bother? The primary reason is that these knots reduce the length of the master point slip should one anchor point fail. Less distance means less acceleration, which means less force shocking the remaining anchor point. And it still allows for different directions of pull, although over a more limited range. It also is now redundant, theoretically, against abrasion and getting cut, as well as a load on the master point that breaks part of the anchor. But in reality, it's only redundant-ish, particularly with Dyneema. Why is that? We need to talk about knots. Knots weaken material by about 50% because of the sharp bends, and Dyneema weakens even a bit more than 50%. But let's go with 50% to make the math easy. We have a 22 kilonewton sling with two independent legs. Each leg has a knot, so each leg can hold 11 kilonewtons. But they are working together, So we get twice the capacity, or back up to 22 kilonewtons. That being said, the stellar humans over at How Not To did some brake tests of Dyneema slings, including the Magic X with load-limiting knots. You can check out the link. And what they found is that if a pulling force overcomes the minimum braking strength, first, it will almost always break the sling at the knot. And second, because there is no longer a tail coming out of that knot can easily unravel and the whole anchor fails. So the anchor will still hold up to 22 kilonewtons, but if it breaks due to loading in the wrong place, it may lose redundancy. It is slightly more redundant, if that makes any sense, against abrasion and cutting because you have a longer tail coming out of the knot, making it harder for the knot to come undone. But because Dyneema is slippery, it will eventually pull through if a sustained force is applied to it. So let's talk about the Ponytail master point. Tying an overhand, or a figure 8 in this case, on a bite using both strands. This is easier to tie, only one knot. It is similarly redundant-ish against abrasion and cutting, and it can avoid shock loading if an anchor point or a leg should fail. But it cannot equalize against a changing direction of pull, essentially turning your anchor points into a primary and a backup rather than an equal system if the pull direction changes. Like the other anchors, it is going to be strong enough to support exceptionally large loads because it is doubled over, increasing the strength, even after tying the knot, which decreases the strength. So what does all this mean? First, tying a knot in a sling does weaken the sling by a very significant amount. Second, but if you double over that sling, and in the case of a quad anchor, quadrupling over the sling, you can get obscenely strong anchors despite the knots. Third, Dyneema's slipperiness compared to other materials does really seem to matter if you have a part of the anchor fail, putting redundancy at risk. Fourth, but Dyneema is very abrasion resistant. That's the good side of being slippery, and super strong, so it is far less likely to break in the first place. And so, fifth, why do people take Dyneema slings and make anchors out of them? Well, they are exceptionally light for being so strong, and that matters for some types of climbing like high altitude or alpine climbing missions. But let me also introduce a sixth point. Soft goods get weak when they get worn and when they get exposed to UV. So you should also consider how new, or at least newish, your slings are when you take them into the field. So hopefully those of you wondering about Dyneema anchors found this interesting and helpful, and maybe it dispelled a few myths like knots in slings equals instant death. Dyneema, nylon, cord, the rope. What type of climbing do you typically do, and what type of anchor material is your go-to? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching this video. Please like, subscribe, do all the things. For more information, you can check out our website at www.shortguysbetaworks.com, and you can check out this video to learn more about taking down those wonderful quad anchors at the top of a sport route and getting down safely. We'll see you next week and keep on getting more out of that big outside.